All right, this week on Monday Mindshare, we speak to another SFuels Endure IQ and Purpose Ambassador athlete about a huge swim that was just accomplished and then also other things that she is working on. Hey there, Coach Aaron here, host of SFuels Monday Mindshare, where we bring endurance and nutrition together to help you go longer. Well, today we have another special guest here on Monday Mindshare, and we have Debbie Collingwood, who is from Vancouver and is a member of the SFuels Endure IQ Purpose family. And Debbie, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Aaron. It's great to be here.
Well, we are excited to kind of go into some of the details of not just what you have just accomplished, but some of the other things about your swimming career and your background. So I guess let's start out by just giving everybody a little bit of intro to who Debbie is.
Oh gosh. I'm Debbie. I'm a middle school teacher by day. That's just sort of how I make money. But yeah, I do marathon, technically ultra marathon. A marathon swim is anything over 10 kilometers. So I do much longer than that. And I'm so lucky. The photo that you're looking at behind Aaron is where I swim. That is my home base. I was there this morning. I'm usually there 2 or 3 times a week, and I'm pretty lucky.
Awesome. So really, Debbie, swimming, has it just been something that you have done since you were a child and it's just kind of kept on and that's your identity, or like how has that come about?
Yeah, I was the kid that my parents were constantly pulling me out of any body of water, in the house, outside. They had to really keep an eye on me near the ocean. I started synchronized swimming when I was pretty young and went till I was about 16, and then I would have had to move away from home to go farther with that, and then master swimming. And then really I didn't really start open water until probably 10-15 years ago. But I just really like going long. I'm not a particularly what we would call in this, master swimmers keep speed for quite a while. I'm not a particularly fast swimmer, but I enjoy going for a long time.
Understand. And you just got done going for a very, very long time. So
I sure did. Yeah.
why don't you tell us a little bit about what you just accomplished, and then we can kind of go into some of the specifics of that accomplishment.
Sure. Yeah, I just finished swimming the English Channel on July 18th, and that for me was 14 hours, 21 minutes.
14 hours and 20 minutes of swimming to most people is just a jaw-dropping amount. And I there's so many questions on my end that come to just that total. But really, one of the things that we talked about off camera was how you kind of kept your mind occupied. And I think that is a very kind of good place to kind of start, where we often ask other endurance athletes when they do something for a long period of time, what they do to kind of pass the time. But in most of those senses, it was either a bike, a run, an Ironman event where you actually have things that you can kind of look at and experience. But for you, what could you see in swimming 14 hours of time?
It's probably the most frequent question I get is, what do you think about? Depending on conditions, I will either I do a lot of math, which sounds really strange, but I've heard a lot of that from a lot of other swimmers, that we run numbers, whether it's about our pace or but because in an actual marathon swim that's being ratified, I can't wear a watch, so I can't keep track of time and pace and that kind of thing. So what I did this time, knowing that I would be stopping every 30 minutes for a feed, I broke it up for the first 30 minutes. I thought of things started with the letter A, second 30 minutes, letter B. So I knew by the time I got to Z, I'd been in the water for about 13 or so hours. And that just helped me sort of keep track of where I might be. One of the challenging things with open water swimming is you kind of, you can set a pace, but you have no idea if that's actually what is happening, because you're so much at the mercy of the ocean. So that's how I kept myself sort of occupied. If like I was telling you before, if conditions are challenging, then I really do have to focus on what I'm doing. But when they're not super challenging, that's when I can lose focus, and I can start, just forgetting about what I'm doing and start almost slowing down a little bit. I get, and those doldrums can be a little bit of a tricky spot for me. And I had really good conditions for the channel, so I had to keep myself focused.
Well, and that's having good conditions kind of has that two-pronged effect where it can be a positive and it can be a negative, but you came through and you stayed focused on that particular day and were able
Yeah.
to. I'm imagining all the different letters that you went through and what you possibly could think, but we could probably spend a long time on just that question.
Yeah, for sure.
So as far as you said, you were talking about every 30 minutes you had a feeding stop. What in a normal, like in that scenario, what were you consuming every 30 minutes?
Yeah. So for the first 3 hours, I was using Train. And I really have to concentrate it, because taking on, a large amount of water every 30 minutes just doesn't work when I'm swimming. So yeah, it's a serving of Train in about 200 mils or so. And the trick with, particularly in the English Channel, is getting them in really quickly. And I was getting my feeds in about 15 seconds. So you really have to check it back. Because if you take any longer, you lose anything that you've swum, because you're dealing with a huge current. So and then after 3 hours, I was using Race Plus, and I think that's all. I didn't take any. Sometimes I like having some solid food, but again, it's a time thing to sit there and have to choose something for, you lose too much. And then I think about 2 hours or so before I finished, or maybe an hour and a half, I was getting a little cranky, and my pilot asked me if I wanted coffee, but I had some tea with and that actually that time, because I was really suffering from the salt water, the effects of the salt water in my mouth and my throat, it was the best tea I'd ever had.
I'm probably anything of a different flavor
Yeah.
at that point in the time, it would have been the greatest thing
Yeah.
probably consumed ever.
Yeah.
So how big, like, of course you're going to have a crew for that particular distance, and how big of the crew did you go to or into that performance with?
So I actually had a pretty small crew. I have one friend who kayaks with me every time I go out in the ocean, or just about every time. And it was him and his son. Some people will have 2 or 3 people. They have a big job. First of all, they have to stay awake for the whole thing. We start at 2 a.m. And seasickness can be a problem for crew. So they have to be able to not, to fight through anything that they're feeling and keep themselves fed and hydrated. It was it was, for England standards, it was a very hot day that I was swimming. So yeah, I had a small crew of 2 people.
All right. If you would have questioned before that, I would have probably said it was much greater, but that's interesting.
Yeah.
It probably is good though. With the smaller crew, you kind of know who you're working with. The communication's quick, the communication's but it's getting on that point. And like you said, when you're in the water, you don't have the ability to stop for large chunks of time because you're losing distance and you're adding time really in that. So that makes that's awesome. The fact that you probably felt really comfortable and got the right directioning on that day that you felt confident in.
Oh, for sure, because my crew is the link between me and my pilot. And so it really, the pilot has the ultimate say if they feel a swim needs to end, but your crew can really be the person who says, nope, she's fine still. This is normal. What we're seeing here is normal behavior, normal change in stroke pattern. And so they have to be a really strong advocate for you. And so the fact that I've known my crew for 15 years, and we've done this this is not the first event we've done together. There's no way you can do it without a strong crew.
Awesome. What and how many, and is this the longest one that you've done, or how does it compare to some of the other events that you've already completed to this point?
Yeah, longest to this point, not by much. I was supposed to do this 2 years ago, and then of course, COVID changed everything. So I'd already, because I didn't know what was happening at that point, made plans to swim around an island that's actually just behind the photo that we're looking at, and it's 33 kilometers, and it took me just over 11 hours. So that was just a little bit shorter than this one. In some regards, it was harder. Then I've done stage racing, like there's an event in Arizona, of all places, 4-day, 67 kilometer, but 4 consecutive marathon, 10K, 10K, 37K, and then 12K. So 67 altogether. And then some other ones sort of locally around BC, and shorter ones that don't require crewing for. Yeah.
So I have to imagine that I'm not the only one that wants to ask this question, so I'm going to ask it. In preparation, what does your volume look like? And how do you go through a training phase to develop the volume to get comfortable to know that when you're going to be out there swimming for that length of time, you're going to be able to hold up and manage through that challenge?
Yeah, there's sort of 2 parts. I do a fair amount in the pool, and that's to keep the strength and the speed up. But the open water component is really, really important. And again, like I said, I'm really lucky that I live in Vancouver and have pretty easy access to it. And conditions around here this year have just been absolutely punishing. We've had a calm day. The day that photo was taken was probably the calmest, but otherwise it's been nothing but wind and swells and chops. So 3 weeks out, I did back-to-back 6-hour swims, which when you compare to a 14-hour doesn't sound like a lot, but doing 6-hour and then getting in the next day and doing 6-hour again that's a big amount of volume. So absolutely. I think in my biggest weeks I was doing 20-25 hours of swimming. Yeah.
And kind of that back-to-back is very similar to how an ultra runner would actually combine their volume. So that makes a lot of sense. It's, again, somebody might hear the difference of 6 hours in a space that you really can't see or be visually, inspired.
Yeah.
It can be tough.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So to kind of go back to how you the trick that you have in the mind, where you said sometimes it's math problems. This last one, you went through the alphabet. Are there any other different tricks, or are there songs that how do you keep kind of some freshness on that?
Yeah, I do have a playlist that I listen to before I swim, like I know a lot of people will do, or just to get me sort of pumped up and going. And sometimes I have to be careful about the last song I listen to, because that might be the one that sticks with me for hours and hours. But really I've become pretty good at just sort of letting the thoughts come and paying attention to ones that I want to pay attention to. It's really, I'm learning it's an exercise in being present, right? And being present, and not just present with the swimming, because, it's very, as far as physically go, it's quite monotonous, like not much changes, right? And so that almost happens automatically now. And that's like when I mentioned earlier that I almost experience like an event amnesia. I don't remember very much of what happened. There's not a lot to remember over those 14 hours. I remember getting stung by jellyfish, and I remember sort of seeing like the halfway, there's a marker that's halfway between England and France. But other than that, there's not much to remember. So yeah, just letting the thoughts come, and sometimes some really interesting things come into my mind. I'm like, oh, I'll give that some more attention, and just letting it happen.
That's really interesting. And to kind of travel back, when or what really inspired you to kind of take this approach? And I know you said earlier that you like just kind of the volume and just the steady state of swimming, but what really had you kind of, was there a particular event? Was there a conversation that you had with a friend or somebody close that kind of had you start to look at, maybe this is something that I want to do?
Yeah, that's a that's a really good question. I mean, I have done an Ironman before. I did that in 2007 with, just sort of varying degree of success, but it was my friend who actually is my main support crew. It just sort of said, like, swimming is your thing. Like, it is, it's what you do. So I'd known about the English Channel, and it's sort of the Everest of open water swimming. Just like Everest is not necessarily the hardest peak to ascend, it's definitely the tallest, but there's other ones that are harder and more technical and more challenging. The English Channel is sort of the grandfather of open water swimming. And it came up in conversation probably 10, 12 years ago, and I resisted for a little while, and then I finally decided, yeah, this is it. This is what I need to do, and this is what I enjoy doing. And it was a big decision, and I made it. You have to book your pilot 2 years in advance. So this was 2 years before 2 years ago. So we're going on 4 years of it being in the books, and that's a long wait.
And especially with it being in, how close were you when you had to pretty much ultimately cancel that first attempt at it?
I think we finally, talking to my pilot, I think might have been May or June, and it was for a July swim. So it was pretty close, right? And that's why I decided I needed to do something else, just to, to keep the momentum that I'd already gained, and just sort of knowing that I was going to have 2 more years to wait. I needed something else to fill that space. Last year I sort of took a little, not quite an off year, but I didn't do any big swims last year. So yeah.
It's probably good planning on your side, just
Yeah.
because it allowed you to refresh the mind. And I'm sure you probably still put a great deal of time in the water, one either pool or open, but probably still allowed you to just kind of enjoy it rather
Yeah.
than tick off all these expectations that you had to get to that point.
For sure.
So what is next, I guess, is the next question.
So up next, and it's been a really ridiculously quick turnaround. I snagged a spot to swim around Manhattan next weekend. I got it on Sunday, so we've just been scrambling to get our travel arrangements sort of made. So it's a distance-wise, it's about the same, but again, with open water swimming, you can't just sort of go by distance. It doesn't translate well. It should be a much shorter swim, about 8 hours, 7.5, 8 hours, but it'll be quite a bit different than swimming the channel. Will be lots more to look at. My kayaker is an amazing photographer, as you can see, and so he'll be really happy with things that he'll get to photograph. Normally you're assigned a kayaker, but we managed to convince them to let my friend kayak for me. So that's next. And then probably just to finish off what's known as the Triple Crown, I will look at Catalina, whether I can get that done next year. It will be 2 years, and then we'll see.
Well, that's exciting. And especially if you can kind of check the box off of that Triple Crown, that's got to make you feel like you've all the preparation, all the work, all just everything that's gone into it. It's got to kind of make you feel like you've gotten to, I don't want to say the top of the mountain, but you're definitely close.
Yeah. It's funny that the mountain keeps changing, though. You think you're at the top, and then you find something else to add
Welcome
on.
to being a competitive athlete.
Yeah.
Can never just sit back and say, yeah, I did that. No, it's always, what's next? What's the next?
Yeah. And this what next is happening really quickly. So
and I mean, you just got back home, and then it's almost like you're there for what, 5 days and then heading back out, or is it a little bit longer?
It'll be about 10. Yeah, we leave
Okay.
we leave on Friday. Just got home on Wednesday. So yeah, 10
Quick,
days.
quick turnaround, but
Yeah.
it's it probably will be nice to get back in and have another box to check.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I was in the water, not quite for the first time today. I swam a little bit in Dover after my swim, as I had a friend who was swimming 2 weeks after me. So we swam, and then I've done a couple of pool swims, and um, yeah, it's what the body wants.
And I mean, how many days after the English Channel swim did it take for you to really feel like, you know what, I can get back into the water?
It was about a week. Um, yeah, there were a lot of interesting things that I dealt with recovery wise for this. There was, my body was certainly telling me that I'd done it, because I could have kept going longer, but as soon as you stop, then of course things just start hurting pretty
Yeah.
monstrously. I'd been dealing with jet lag that my pilot suggested I not try to adjust because of we were leaving at 2 a.m. local time. So I was trying to, fight the jet lag a little bit. The effects of the salt water had a huge impact on me just eating afterwards.
Mhm.
And then just like I said, just convincing myself that I'd actually done it. You go through this weird sort of phase of doubting that you can do it, to doing it, to not really remembering that you did it. So sort of doubting that you actually did it. And that was a tough one. So I was having the dreams, waking up in the middle of the night thinking, oh my gosh, I've missed it, I'm late, and do I have my passport, am I ready, just the little things.
Right.
So it was a solid week, yeah, if not a bit longer.
That's very interesting. And you spoke that it did kind of affect what you had eat afterwards. But I guess another question, what was the first like big substance meal that you had after that accomplishment?
Yeah, it was about 24 hours afterwards, because anything I tried to eat, the only way I can even begin to describe how food tasted was like battery acid. Um, Taste buds were just completely fried from the salt water, and my mouth hurt, my tongue hurt, my
Yeah.
mouth hurt. Yeah, it was burger and fries. Yeah,
So I mean, you needed some calories, especially if the 24 hours had passed. Nothing sounded really
yeah,
good, and your taste buds were fried. You
yeah,
probably needed something that had
yeah,
a little bit of a calorie bomb to it.
yeah. I tried some really, really plain food, and even that was just, yeah, it was painful to eat.
Which, that's another piece that is extremely interesting. But that does lead me to the question of being an SFuels athlete, that of course you take a somewhat approach of low carb, healthy fat in
Mhm.
that case. Really, when did you start to make that transformation within your life and your athletic career?
It was about 2.5, 3 years ago when I raced. There's an event called the event in Arizona called SCAR. I was still using carb fuel, and I just remember after the first day just feeling absolutely miserable. Because that was a 3-hour swim, and I was using a carb based, and just for the rest of the evening just feeling like, I had major gut distress and not able to eat. Um, and then it was mostly for a health and lifestyle, just trying to
Mhm.
lose some weight and feeling much better. But then really struggling with trying to figure out how I was going to fuel for these events. If the only thing out there was a carb based, I was like, well, that's not super helpful. And then somewhere along the way stumbled upon SFuels, and I thought, oh yay, I can finally support, these long events that I'm doing.
Well, and especially the one in Arizona where it was a couple of days, I would think that the stages, I mean, you probably have a completely different effect overall on the 4 swims, less inflammation, lack
Yeah.
of, GI distress. I guess I would question, would that be something that would be on the to-do list to maybe go again, like
Yeah.
participate in something that you did pre transformation to fat oxidation after, to see the difference? Is that something that has ever crossed your mind?
Yeah, it would be really interesting. There are other, multi-day events out there. So whether I would go back and do Arizona, who knows? But there's a few other, actually a bit longer, more like a 7-day, stage swimming. And yeah, it would be really interesting to see and feel the difference, I think.
Yeah, I think that would be a good experiment, I guess, is how I'm looking at it.
Yeah, yeah,
It would be a fun experiment to go through, and especially if you're the one doing the swimming, then that would be even better on my
yeah.
experimentation. So in that, how do you utilize, I mean, when you're going through a normal training cycle, do you predominantly stick with the train product, or how do you kind of mingle in the SFuels products into your training regime, especially leading into a swim of this size?
Yeah, it's been evolving. So 2 years ago when I did the 33K swim, I only used train. Um, and it worked really well for me. I think it was before even there were bars available, or there might have been, but chewing is a bit of an issue for me when I swim. It's just it's time consuming, but it also just, I just sit there and chew and chew and chew and chew. And so I think I had, there's a couple of other low carb, higher fat bars out there that I just little chunks, but it's being horizontal for that length of time. You really, the gut can really get a bit cranky regardless of what's in it. So yeah, it's evolved. I just started using the Race Plus for my longer, my over 3 hour swim.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's anything 3 hours or under, I stick with train, and then it's the Race Plus. I'm going to tinker with my formula a little bit just to see if I can get the water content down a little bit, or try the gel. It's you do still perspire when you're swimming. It's just less, and it's particularly because I'm swimming in colder water. And then I've been using the Prime. The caffeine I find really is helpful in many regards. And I'm a coffee drinker, so I'll still have my coffee on the Prime.
Nothing wrong with that. You gotta, especially with the dose of caffeine, it's going to get your mind right and
Yeah,
get you ready to kind of focus and dial in for the work that needs to get done.
yeah, for sure.
Well, that's awesome. I mean, if there is anybody, do you have any wise words for anybody that might be looking at, either if they're on the fence of doing like a marathon style swim, or if they've never thought about it, are there any kind of expert words that you have that you might inspire somebody to maybe take this chance and get out there and do it?
Yeah, it's still, I think we're still looked at as a fairly odd bunch of people. Even, within the marathon swimming community. It is it's a sport that, does require, I think, a little bit of a different dedication, particularly, with no wetsuit. And it can be very, I think it's very intimidating for many people, especially if you've been swimming, and I say shorter distances, like even Ironman distances with a wetsuit. Getting out of the wetsuit for many people is a really, it's a big step. And so I think if you're already swimming but with a wetsuit, and you're wanting to maybe look at doing a true marathon swim, which is no wetsuit, that's the biggest, I think, for a lot of people, and it does change a lot, right? It's sort of like would be the equivalent of going from being a track runner to a trail runner. There's lots of different things. Your marathon swims, you're often out very exposed. There's not a lot of protection from, you're not necessarily in a nice little, bay. So it's definitely some intimidating. I think finding a community of people who do this, and, is really important. Swimming, you need to make sure, swimming alone is never a great idea. I'm not saying I never do it. I do, but I make sure I'm really careful when I do it. But having a community of people that you can swim with, especially if you're dealing with colder temperatures, or bigger conditions, and finding, if you are thinking of doing the things that require crew, that you need to find somebody who can support you to get it done. So, but getting out of the wetsuit, that for a lot of people is a big step.
Trust me, I coach a lot of triathletes, and anytime that wetsuit is not legal, I hear the moans and groans. So trust me, I know all about that.
Yeah, I've done a few triathlons where the water just hits whatever that temperature was, and you can hear the collective groan, and I'm excited because I'm like, all right.
And I do have a couple of athletes that hear that, and they start licking their chops. I'm taking advantage of people today, so I know exactly where you're coming from on that. So I think that's a really, really good piece of information. And if somebody maybe wanted to reach out to you with some questions, I mean, is there a way that they might be able to do so?
Absolutely. Yeah. Either on Facebook through here, or on Instagram, I'm at DC to DAEC. The EC was English Channel, so it was Debbie Collingwood to the English Channel. Well, we just decided we need to change that because I've already done it, but that's my Instagram handle, and I'm pretty active on there. So yeah, and that's actually something that I've been pretty excited about recently, is the number of people reaching out and just wanting support and advice. And my kayaker and I are looking at ways that we can support more people just making that leap into open water swimming.
Well, I think that's awesome, and especially getting more people into what you do typically allows it to evolve, but also it makes it a little bit safer for whether it's
Absolutely.
just in numbers or whatever it might be. It does provide just a little bit of safety. I say that especially from biking, running, especially swimming, just because as you talked about, having somebody to go out with and do some of this crazy stuff with, it's always welcomed, I'm sure.
Yeah, and COVID did some good things for open water swimming. When the pools were closed, the numbers just shot up, and so there's lots more people interested in open water, and a few more trying to make the leap from wetsuit to skins. So yeah, it's getting there.
Well, that's awesome, and it probably helps that you're in a great place with some great water in your area too.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, Debbie, I want to thank you for coming on today. It's been awesome to kind of hear your story, and I especially want to celebrate and give you a big, big pat on the back for accomplishing that task. And hopefully some more people will reach out to you, and we can kind of grow that endurance swimming community.
That would be great. Yeah, I think I'm one of the only ones, if not the only one in the SFuels community. So it'd be exciting for it to grow a little bit.
Well, and they know where to stop and ask questions now for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. Ask away. There's no dumb questions.
I love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. And Debbie, again, thank you very much. And everyone, we want to thank you for tuning into this week's Monday Mind Share and getting to know Debbie a little bit better. And I guarantee there's not one person that's going to watch this, including myself, that's not impressed with your accomplishment, Debbie.
Thank you.
Well, again, thank you for tuning in to Monday Mind Share. Let's go longer.